The storm and the strangers. The rain lashed against the windows of Marcus Whitman's grand mansion as he stared out into the dark, stormy night. At 42, Marcus was a man of wealth and success, his empire built on hard work and calculated risks. Yet, as he stood in his sprawling estate surrounded by luxury, he felt hollow inside. His life, despite its achievements, lacked something he couldn't name. The storm raged on, thunder shaking the ground beneath him. He checked his phone and saw a message from his driver. "Mr. Whitman, the roads are too dangerous in this weather. I can't make it tonight." Frustrated but undeterred, Marcus grabbed his umbrella and coat. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll walk." The city streets were nearly deserted. Rain battered his expensive leather shoes, and his tailored coat clung to him. He moved briskly, his thoughts swirling as violently as the storm overhead. Underneath a crumbling overpass, a faint sound stopped him. A voice, soft but steady, carried through the rain. "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream." Marcus turned toward the sound and saw two figures huddled against the wall. Two boys, no older than 12, clung to each other for warmth. The older boy shielded the younger one with a tattered jacket, his expression guarded. The younger one sang quietly, his voice trembling but defiant against the storm. Marcus's heart clenched. There was something hauntingly familiar about their faces. Sharp cheekbones, strong chins, eyes filled with resilience. For a moment, he thought he was staring at his own reflection as a boy. He took a step closer, his voice steady but soft. "Hey, are you boys all right?" The singing stopped. The older boy's eyes narrowed with suspicion as he pulled his brother closer. "We're fine," he said, his tone firm despite the vulnerability in his voice. "Just waiting out the rain." Marcus hesitated, his instincts telling him not to push. "There's a shelter nearby," he offered. "I could take you." Before he could finish, the older boy grabbed his brother's hand and bolted. They disappeared into the rain, leaving Marcus standing there, stunned. He followed at a distance, watching as they slipped into an abandoned building. Through a broken window, he saw the older boy carefully wrapping the younger one in their makeshift blanket. The sight stirred memories he tried to bury, nights spent in shelters, protecting his younger brother from the world's cruelty. The next morning, Marcus returned to the building with supplies, backpacks filled with clothes, food, and blankets. His Mercedes stood out against the decaying surroundings, a symbol of everything he'd worked for and everything he'd lost. Inside, he found the boys sitting together. The older one was sketching something on a scrap of paper, while the younger one played with a small broken toy. They froze when they saw him. "I brought some things," Marcus said, keeping his voice calm. He set the bags down and stepped back, giving them space. Food, clothes, blankets. The younger boy's eyes lit up as he spotted a box of cookies. "Look, Jay," he whispered excitedly. The older boy, Jaden, as Marcus would later learn, hesitated, his instincts warring with their obvious need. Finally, he nodded. The younger boy scrambled forward, tearing into the food with unrestrained joy. "Thank you," Jaden said quietly, his voice measured but sincere. Marcus nodded, his resolve hardening. He didn't know why, but he couldn't walk away. These boys weren't just a reflection of his past. They were a chance to make things right. "Do you have names?" Marcus asked gently. The younger boy grinned, crumbs on his face. "I'm Jordan. He's Jaden." "Well, Jaden and Jordan," Marcus said with a rare smile. "How about we get you out of here?" Jaden's eyes narrowed as he considered Marcus's offer. His protective instincts were on full display, his body positioned slightly in front of his younger brother. He didn't trust easily. Marcus could see that much, but who could blame him? The world had been unkind to kids like them. "We're fine," Jaden replied, his tone guarded. "We don't need help." Marcus crouched down to their level, careful to keep his movements slow and non-threatening. "I know it's hard to trust someone you don't know," he said softly. But I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help. Jordan, still chewing on a cookie, looked at his brother with wide eyes. Jay, he brought cookies. And sandwiches. Real ones. His voice was filled with awe, and Marcus's heart broke a little at the thought of how rare this simple kindness must have been for them. Jaden's jaw tightened, his internal debate playing out in his expression. Finally, he gave Marcus a curt nod. "Okay," he said reluctantly. "We'll come with you. But just for today." "That's all I'm asking," Marcus said, relief washing over him. "Let's start with breakfast. Then we'll figure out the rest." The ride to Marcus's mansion was quiet. Jordan pressed his face against the car window, marveling at the city flashing past, while Jaden sat stiffly, his arms crossed and his eyes fixed on Marcus. The boy didn't say a word, but Marcus could feel the weight of his scrutiny. When they pulled up to the massive gates of Marcus's estate, Jordan let out a low whistle. "This is your house?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Yeah," Marcus replied, glancing at Jaden, whose expression remained unreadable. "It's home. For now. It's yours too." The boys stepped inside, their reactions as different as their personalities. Jordan darted from room to room, wide-eyed and full of questions. "Do you have a pool? Can we swim? Oh wow, is that a movie theater?" Jaden, on the other hand, lingered by the front door, his posture tense. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally, his voice low but steady. Marcus met the boy's gaze, seeing in him a reflection of his own younger self. "Because I've been where you are," he said honestly. "And I know how hard it is to feel like no one's looking out for you. I just want to give you a chance. Both of you." Jaden didn't respond, but his eyes softened slightly. Marcus took that as a small victory. Later that afternoon, as Marcus prepared lunch in the kitchen, a rare act for him, the doorbell rang. He opened the door to find a woman with a kind face and a badge clipped to her shirt. "Mr. Whitman, I'm Maria Sanchez, a social worker with the city. I heard you brought Jaden and Jordan Whittaker to your home." Marcus nodded, motioning for her to come in. "Yes, they're here. I found them last night in the storm." Maria's expression was a mix of relief and concern. "They've been on our radar for months. Their parents passed away in an apartment fire 2 years ago, and they've been bouncing around the system ever since. 4 foster homes in 18 months, and none of them worked out. Keeping them together has been difficult." Marcus's stomach tightened at her words. He thought of the boys sitting in his living room, trying to process a world that had been cruel to them. "What happens now?" he asked. "That depends," Maria said carefully. "If you're willing, there's a process to foster them formally. It's not easy. Background checks, home studies, court appearances. But if you're serious, I can help you start." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." Maria blinked, clearly taken aback. "You understand what you're committing to, right? These boys have been through a lot. They need more than just financial support. They need stability, love, and patience." "I understand," Marcus said firmly. "They deserve a chance at a real home, and I'm willing to give it to them." That evening, Marcus sat with Jaden and Jordan at the dinner table. He'd ordered pizza, a safe bet for kids, he figured, and watched as Jordan devoured slice after slice, his enthusiasm infectious. Jaden ate more slowly, his sharp eyes scanning the room as if cataloging every detail. "This place is huge," Jordan said between bites. "It's like a castle. Do you have a moat?" Marcus chuckled. "No moat, but there's a pond in the garden." "Can we see it?" Jordan asked eagerly. "Tomorrow," Marcus promised. "It's getting late." As the boys finished eating, Marcus took a deep breath. "I talked to a social worker today," he said, keeping his tone gentle. "She told me about your parents, about what you've been through." Jaden froze, his fork hovering midair. Jordan looked down at his plate, his earlier excitement dimming. "I know you've had a hard time," Marcus continued. "And I know it's not easy to trust someone new. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. You don't have to go through this alone anymore." For a moment, neither boy said anything. Then Jaden set his fork down and looked Marcus in the eye. "We've heard that before," he said quietly. "And it never lasts." Marcus felt a pang of sorrow at the boy's words, but he didn't flinch. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "No matter what." Jordan's voice broke the silence. "Promise?" he asked, his tone uncertain but hopeful. Marcus smiled. "Promise." The first night was quiet, but not peaceful. Marcus found himself checking on the boys every hour, making sure they were still there, still safe. Jaden slept fitfully, his brow furrowed even in sleep. Jordan clutched a stuffed animal Marcus had bought earlier that day, his small body curled tightly under the blankets. Standing in the doorway of their shared room, Marcus felt an unfamiliar but welcome sensation. Purpose. For the first time in years, his life felt like it had meaning beyond wealth and success, and he knew, in that moment, that he would do whatever it took to keep these boys safe. A new beginning, a fragile trust. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Marcus Whitman's sprawling mansion. The once empty halls, decorated with art and wealth, now echoed with new sounds. The hesitant shuffles of feet, the faint murmur of a curious child's voice, and the occasional burst of laughter. For Marcus, these sounds were foreign, and yet, for the first time, his home didn't feel so hollow. Jaden and Jordan sat at the breakfast table, their expressions a mix of awe and hesitation. The table was laden with an array of food: freshly squeezed orange juice, fluffy scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and a basket of warm croissants. Marcus watched from the kitchen island, unsure if he was doing too much or too little. Jordan was the first to speak. "We get to eat all this?" His wide eyes darted across the spread. Marcus nodded, hiding his smile. "It's breakfast. Help yourselves." Jordan needed no further encouragement. He reached for the bacon, a grin spreading across his face as he took a bite. Jaden, however, remained still, his eyes flickering between Marcus and his brother. "You don't have to eat if you're not hungry," Marcus said gently. "But it's here if you want it." Jaden grabbed a croissant, his movements deliberate and guarded. He tore off a small piece and ate silently, his posture stiff. Marcus didn't push. He knew trust wasn't something you earned overnight. The day unfolded slowly. Marcus, a man used to boardrooms and tight schedules, now found himself navigating the delicate terrain of parenting. It wasn't easy. "Can we play outside?" Jordan asked, bouncing on the balls of his feet after breakfast. Marcus glanced at Jaden, who was sketching at the kitchen table. "If Jaden wants to." Jordan turned to his brother, practically vibrating with excitement. "Come on, Jay. There's a whole yard out there. You've got to see it." Jaden shrugged but stood up, clutching his ever-present sketchbook. "I guess." Marcus led them to the backyard, where the sprawling lawn stretched into a small garden and pond. Jordan ran ahead, his laughter filling the air as he darted around the open space. Jaden, on the other hand, hung back, observing. "You can explore," Marcus said, standing beside him. "It's okay." Jaden looked up at him, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he made his way to a shaded corner of the garden, sat down, and began to draw. Marcus watched them for a moment, a mix of relief and worry swirling in his chest. Jordan's joy was infectious, but Jaden's guardedness was a reminder of the road ahead. That afternoon, Maria Sanchez, the social worker, arrived for a home visit. She surveyed the boys carefully as they sat in the living room, Jordan flipping through a book while Jaden sketched. Marcus stood nearby, feeling like he was being scrutinized. "They seem more relaxed," Maria said, addressing Marcus but keeping her eyes on the boys. "That's a good sign." "It's only been a day," Marcus replied, his voice low. "I know there's a long way to go." Maria nodded. "True, but small steps matter. Have you given any thought to their schooling?" Marcus hesitated. "I was waiting to see what they'd prefer. I didn't want to overwhelm them." Maria smiled faintly. That's the right approach. Let them adjust first. As she prepared to leave, Maria pulled Marcus aside. Jaden's going to be the tougher one, she said softly. He's protective of Jordan, and he's been through a lot. Earning his trust will take time. Marcus glanced at the boy, who was now focused intently on his drawing. I'll do whatever it takes, he said firmly. That evening, Marcus decided to try something different. After dinner, he brought out a board game, something simple that he hoped would lighten the mood. Do you guys know how to play this? He asked, setting the game on the coffee table. Jordan's face lit up. Yeah, we used to play this at the shelter sometimes. Jaden didn't respond, but he sat down next to his brother, his expression wary but curious. As the game began, Jordan's competitive streak quickly emerged. I'm gonna win, Jay, he declared, his grin infectious. Not if I beat you first, Marcus said, his tone teasing. For the first time, Jaden smirked. We'll see about that. The game stretched on, laughter and banter filling the room. By the end, Jordan had won, though not without some playful protests from Marcus. Rematch tomorrow, Jordan announced as he stretched out on the couch. Marcus glanced at Jaden, who was quietly packing up the game pieces. What about you? Think you can beat your brother next time? Jaden met Marcus's eyes briefly before looking away. Maybe. It was a small word, but it carried weight. Marcus took it as a victory. Later that night, Marcus found himself standing outside the boys' room. He peeked in to find Jordan fast asleep, his arms wrapped around a stuffed animal Marcus had given him earlier. Jaden, however, was sitting by the window, his sketchbook on his lap. Marcus knocked softly. Mind if I come in? Jaden shrugged but didn't protest. Marcus stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. What are you drawing? Jaden hesitated before showing him. It was a sketch of the garden, the lines precise and deliberate. In the corner, two figures, Jordan and himself, were shaded in. It's good, Marcus said sincerely. You've got talent. Jaden didn't respond, but his grip on the sketchbook tightened. Marcus took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. I know you don't trust me yet, he said. And that's okay. But I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. For a long moment, Jaden didn't say anything. Then finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Everyone leaves. Marcus's chest ached at the words, but he kept his tone steady. Not me, he said firmly. I'm here for you and Jordan. Always. Jaden didn't reply, but he didn't push Marcus away either. It was a start. As Marcus left the room, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. These boys were his responsibility now, and he was determined to give them the life they deserved, no matter how long it took. Cracks in the armor. The days began to fall into a tentative rhythm at Marcus Whitman's mansion. Mornings were filled with cautious routines, breakfast, moments of light conversation, and Jordan's endless curiosity about every corner of the house. But Jaden remained an enigma, retreating into his sketchbook or watching from the sidelines. Despite the growing semblance of normalcy, Marcus could sense the tension bubbling just beneath the surface. It was on a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the first cracks in their fragile peace appeared. Marcus stood in his home office, sorting through paperwork for the adoption process. Legal documents, financial disclosures, and background checks stacked high on his desk. It was daunting, but Marcus felt a sense of resolve every time he thought about Jaden and Jordan. They were worth every obstacle. The faint sound of raised voices from the living room drew his attention. He set down the papers and walked out to find Jordan pacing, his face red with frustration. Jaden sat on the couch, his expression tight and unreadable, his sketchbook abandoned on the table. What's going on? Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm. He won't play with me. Jordan burst out, pointing at his brother. I just wanted to play soccer, and he said no. He always says no. Jaden's jaw tightened, and he shot Marcus a wary look, as if expecting to be blamed. I didn't feel like it. he muttered, crossing his arms. Marcus knelt to Jordan's level. Hey, buddy, I know it's frustrating, but maybe Jaden's not in the mood right now. How about I play with you instead? Jordan hesitated, clearly wanting to protest further, but he finally nodded. Okay. As Marcus led Jordan outside, he glanced back at Jaden. The boy had picked up his sketchbook again, his posture tense. Marcus made a mental note to check on him later. Out in the yard, Marcus kicked the soccer ball around with Jordan, who was a whirlwind of energy and enthusiasm. The boys' laughter echoed across the garden, and for a moment, Marcus allowed himself to revel in the joy of the simple game. Dad, watch this, Jordan called out, his face lighting up as he effortlessly dribbled the ball past Marcus and scored a goal. Marcus froze. The word dad had slipped from Jordan's mouth so naturally, so innocently, that it caught him off guard. His chest tightened with emotion, and he quickly recovered, clapping and cheering. Nice one, buddy. You're getting really good. As the game wound down, Marcus noticed Jaden standing at the edge of the garden, watching them. His expression was hard to read, but there was a flicker of something, longing, maybe, in his eyes. Marcus decided not to call him over, letting him observe from a distance. That evening, as Marcus was tidying up the kitchen after dinner, Jaden wandered in. He didn't say anything, just hovered near the doorway, his sketchbook clutched tightly in his hands. Everything okay? Marcus asked, keeping his tone casual. Jaden hesitated, then shrugged. Jordan's too loud sometimes. Marcus chuckled. He's got a lot of energy, but he means well. Jaden didn't respond. Instead, he opened his sketchbook and began drawing at the kitchen island. Marcus watched him for a moment before grabbing a mug of tea and sitting down across from him. What are you working on? Marcus asked. Jaden glanced up briefly, then turned the sketchbook toward Marcus. It was a detailed drawing of the garden, complete with the soccer ball sitting near the goalpost. But what caught Marcus's attention was the way Jaden had drawn himself, standing apart from the others, a shadowy figure on the edge of the scene. It's good, Marcus said sincerely. But you don't have to stand on the sidelines, you know. You can join in whenever you want. Jaden's grip on the sketchbook tightened. It's easier this way, he said quietly. Marcus frowned. Easier? Jaden looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. If you don't get close, it doesn't hurt as much when they leave. The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Jaden, I'm not leaving. Neither is Jordan. We're not going anywhere. Jaden didn't respond, but the faint tremble in his hand spoke volumes. Marcus decided to let the conversation rest, knowing it would take time to break through the boys' walls. A week later, Maria Sanchez visited again, this time to conduct a more formal assessment. Marcus had prepared meticulously, ensuring the boys' rooms were tidy and the house felt welcoming. Maria greeted Jaden and Jordan warmly, sitting with them in the living room while Marcus observed from a distance. She asked them about their routines, their interests, and how they felt about living with Marcus. Jordan was enthusiastic, recounting their soccer games in the garden. And he makes pancakes on Sundays. They're almost as good as Mom's, he said, his grin infectious. Jaden, however, was more reserved. He answered Maria's questions with short, polite responses, his body language closed off. Maria took note, but didn't press him. It's okay to take your time, she said gently. You don't have to have all the answers right now. After the session, Maria pulled Marcus aside. Jordan seems to be adjusting well, she said, but Jaden, he's carrying a lot. He's trying to protect himself, and probably Jordan too. I can see that, Marcus said. What can I do? Patience, Maria replied. And consistency. Show him that you're here for the long haul. The breakthrough came unexpectedly one evening. Marcus was working late in his office when he heard soft footsteps. He looked up to see Jaden standing in the doorway, his expression hesitant. Can I come in? Jaden asked. Of course, Marcus said, setting aside his work. Jaden stepped inside, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. I wanted to show you something. Marcus's heart raced as Jaden opened the sketchbook to a fresh page. The drawing was of their backyard, but this time it was different. Jaden had drawn himself in the scene, standing next to Marcus and Jordan, a faint smile on his face. I thought, maybe I could try, Jaden said, his voice barely audible. Marcus felt a lump in his throat as he looked at the drawing. It's perfect, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And I'd love that. Jaden gave a small, tentative smile, the first real one Marcus had seen. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time, he felt like they were truly on their way to becoming a family. Shadows of the past. The Whitman mansion buzzed with the subtle hum of a life being rebuilt. Marcus Whitman, once a man driven solely by ambition, now found himself navigating a new purpose: fatherhood. Jordan's laughter filled the once quiet halls, and Jaden's tentative presence became a steady rhythm. But for all the warmth and progress, the shadows of the boys' past, and Marcus's own, lurked in the corners, waiting to resurface. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus woke early, determined to spend time with the boys before their day began. He found Jordan in the kitchen, his face smeared with flour as he attempted to make pancakes. You've got quite the mess going here, Marcus said, chuckling as he grabbed a towel to wipe Jordan's face. I wanted to surprise you. Jordan grinned, holding up a lumpy, half-cooked pancake. It's edible, I think. Marcus laughed and grabbed a spatula. Let's turn this into a team effort. By the time Jaden wandered downstairs, the kitchen smelled of syrup and butter, and the table was filled with steaming stacks of pancakes. Jaden hesitated in the doorway, his eyes flicking between Marcus and Jordan. You're just in time, Marcus said, pulling out a chair for him. Grab a plate. Jaden sat down, his movements cautious, but Marcus noticed the faintest hint of a smile as he reached for the syrup. Later that day, while Marcus was sorting through paperwork in his office, the doorbell rang. He opened it to find a man in a worn suit holding a folder. The man introduced himself as Ethan Riley, a private investigator. I've been looking into the circumstances around the fire that killed the boys' parents, Ethan said. I think you'll want to see this. Marcus's stomach tightened as he led Ethan into the study. The folder was filled with documents, photos, and a single faded envelope addressed to Jaden and Jordan Whittaker. The fire wasn't an accident, Ethan said, his voice grave. It was arson. Marcus felt his breath catch. Arson? Are you sure? Ethan nodded. Someone deliberately set that fire. And there's more. Your father's name came up in connection with the building's ownership. Marcus stared at the investigator, his mind reeling. His father, a man he had idolized despite his flaws, was now tied to the tragedy that had shaped the boys' lives. It was too much to process. I need time to think about this, Marcus said, his voice strained. Of course, Ethan replied. But the truth will come out eventually. For the next few days, Marcus carried the weight of the revelation like a stone in his chest. He couldn't bring himself to tell the boys. Not yet. They were just beginning to feel safe, to trust him. How could he shatter that with news of their parents' death being tied to his family? But secrets have a way of surfacing. One evening, as Marcus prepared to read to Jordan before bed, Jaden appeared in the doorway, holding the faded envelope from Ethan's folder. Marcus froze. Where did you find that? He asked carefully. In your office, Jaden replied, his voice tight. You left the folder out. Marcus sighed, motioning for Jaden to sit beside him. I was going to tell you, he began. I just didn't know how. Jaden crossed his arms, his expression a mixture of anger and hurt. You knew about the fire. I only just found out, Marcus said, his voice earnest. And I'm still trying to make sense of it myself. Jaden's eyes filled with tears, though he tried to hide them. Why didn't you tell us? Because I didn't want to hurt you, Marcus said. You've been through so much already. Jordan, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. What's in the letter? Jaden hesitated before handing it to Marcus. You read it. Marcus opened the envelope with trembling hands. The letter was written in a shaky but familiar handwriting. Laura's. To my boys. If you're reading this, it means something has happened to me. I don't have much time to explain, but I need you to know how much I love you. I tried to keep you safe, but there are people who didn't want us to be happy. Don't let them win. Be strong and stick together, always. Love, Mom. The room fell silent as Marcus finished reading. Jordan clung to his brother, his small body shaking with sobs. Jaden's face was a mask of pain, his hands clenched into fists. Marcus reached out to them, his voice breaking. I promise you, I'll find out who did this, and I'll make sure they're held accountable. For the first time, Jaden didn't push him away. Instead, he leaned into Marcus's shoulder, his tears soaking into Marcus's shirt. Jordan followed, and the three of them sat there, bound by grief and a determination to uncover the truth. In the weeks that followed, Marcus worked tirelessly with Ethan to piece together the events leading up to the fire. The investigation revealed a tangled web of corruption involving his father's business dealings and a shady real estate developer. It became clear that the fire was part of a scheme to drive tenants out of the building, but something had gone horribly wrong. As Marcus delved deeper, he struggled with his own guilt. His family's legacy, which he had spent years building and defending, was now intertwined with the tragedy that had orphaned Jaden and Jordan. How could he ask them to trust him when his own father had played a role in their suffering? One evening, as the investigation reached a critical point, Marcus called a family meeting in the living room. Jaden and Jordan sat on the couch, their expressions wary but attentive. I found out more about the fire, Marcus began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. And I need to be honest with you. He explained everything, his father's connection to the building, the arson, and the tangled motives behind it all. He left nothing out, his heart breaking as he watched the boys process the painful truth. I know this doesn't change what happened, Marcus said, his voice trembling. But I want you to know that I'm doing everything I can to make things right. Jaden looked at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and vulnerability. You're not like him, he said quietly. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Jordan, still clutching his stuffed animal, spoke up. Are we still a family? Marcus knelt in front of them, his voice firm. Yes. No matter what. We're a family, and nothing will ever change that. For the first time, Marcus felt the weight of their trust, fragile but real, and he vowed to protect it with everything he had. Healing the wounds. The truth had changed everything. Marcus Whitman had spent weeks piecing together the threads of the tragedy that had torn apart Jaden and Jordan's lives. The boys, now armed with the truth about their parents' deaths, were navigating a storm of emotions: grief, anger, confusion. Marcus could see the weight on their young shoulders, and he felt a deep responsibility to guide them through it. But healing was not a straight path. It was a winding road, full of setbacks and unexpected breakthroughs. The morning began quietly, the house wrapped in an uneasy calm. Jaden and Jordan sat at the breakfast table, their plates mostly untouched. Marcus watched them from the kitchen, unsure how to bridge the growing distance. Do you want to visit the park today? Marcus asked, keeping his tone light. Maybe kick the soccer ball around. Jordan perked up slightly, but Jaden shook his head. I'm not in the mood, he mumbled, staring down at his plate. Marcus's heart ached, but he didn't press. That's okay. You don't have to. Jordan hesitated before speaking. Can we still go? Just us? Of course, Marcus said with a small smile. Let's grab the ball and head out. The park was alive with the sound of children playing and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Marcus and Jordan found a quiet corner of the field, away from the commotion. Jordan's energy was infectious as he darted across the grass, kicking the ball with enthusiasm. "You're getting really good," Marcus said, catching the ball and passing it back. "I think you might be ready for a team." Jordan's face lit up. "Really? Do you think I could play in tournaments?" "Absolutely," Marcus replied. "We'll sign you up for tryouts next week." The promise brought a rare moment of pure joy to Jordan's face, and Marcus felt a flicker of hope. But as they packed up to leave, Jordan's excitement dimmed. "Do you think Jaden will come next time?" he asked softly. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "I hope so. He just needs time." Back at the mansion, Marcus found Jaden in the library, hunched over his sketchbook. The boy didn't look up as Marcus approached, his pencil moving steadily across the page. "Hey," Marcus said gently. "Can I see what you're working on?" Jaden hesitated, then turned the sketchbook toward him. The drawing was dark and haunting. A crumbling building engulfed in flames, with two small figures standing in the foreground. Marcus's chest tightened. "That's powerful," he said carefully. "Is this how you remember it?" Jaden nodded, his expression unreadable. "I dream about it a lot. The fire. Mom yelling for us to get out. I keep thinking, what if I'd done something different? Could I have saved her?" Marcus knelt beside him, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Jaden, what happened wasn't your fault. You were just a kid. There was nothing you could have done." Jaden's eyes filled with tears, but he quickly wiped them away. "I don't know how to stop thinking about it." "You don't have to forget," Marcus said softly. "But you can let yourself heal. And you don't have to do it alone." For the first time, Jaden didn't pull away. He nodded slowly, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his usual guarded demeanor. The turning point came a week later, during a visit to the Laura Whittaker Foundation, the nonprofit Marcus had established in the boy's mother's honor. The foundation's headquarters were bustling with activity, volunteers sorting donations and children playing in the courtyard. Marcus led Jaden and Jordan through the building, showing them the art room, the library, and the activity center. "This is all because of your mom," he said. "Her strength, her love. It's what inspired me to do this." In the art room, Jaden stopped in front of a mural painted by local artists. It depicted a mother and two children standing in a field of flowers, their faces turned toward the sun. Jaden stared at it for a long time, his expression unreadable. "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know she would be. She loved you both more than anything." Jordan ran up, holding a small soccer ball he'd found in the activity center. "Look, they have everything here. Can we come back?" "As much as you want," Marcus said, smiling. For the first time in weeks, Marcus saw a spark of hope in Jaden's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, the boys began to open up in small but significant ways. Jordan joined a local soccer team, his confidence growing with every game. Jaden started spending more time in the art room at the foundation, his sketches evolving from dark, brooding images to scenes filled with light and color. One evening, as Marcus was preparing dinner, Jaden approached him with a rolled-up piece of paper. "I made something," he said hesitantly. Marcus took the paper and unrolled it, his breath catching. It was a family portrait. Marcus, Jaden, and Jordan standing together in the garden, their faces filled with warmth and connection. "It's beautiful," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Jaden shrugged, but there was a hint of a smile on his lips. "I thought it might look good in the living room." "It'll look perfect," Marcus replied, already imagining where to hang it. One rainy afternoon, as the boys worked on homework at the kitchen table, Marcus received a call from Ethan Riley. "We found the person responsible for the fire," Ethan said. "It's time to confront the truth." Marcus hung up, his mind racing. He looked at the boys, their faces focused on their schoolwork, and felt a surge of determination. The truth was painful, but it was also necessary. For them to heal, they needed closure. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice steadied despite the storm in his chest. Confronting the past, embracing the future. The storm outside mirrored the tension in Marcus Whitman's living room. Jaden and Jordan sat on the couch, their faces pale as Marcus stood before them, gripping a folder in his hands. This moment had been building for weeks, ever since the truth about the fire began to unravel. Now, the time had come to confront the past head-on. Marcus took a deep breath. "I need to tell you both something," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "We've found the person responsible for the fire that took your parents." Jaden's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and anger flashing across his face. Jordan clutched his brother's arm, his small body trembling. "Who?" Jaden demanded, his voice sharp. "It was someone working for a real estate developer," Marcus explained carefully. "They wanted to force the tenants out of the building, but things went horribly wrong. The fire wasn't supposed to happen the way it did." "Why didn't they care?" Jordan asked, tears streaming down his face. "Why didn't they care about us?" Marcus knelt before them, his heart breaking at the pain in their voices. "Because some people only care about money," he said softly. "But they're being held accountable now. The person who caused the fire is being charged, and the developer's operations are under investigation." Jaden's fists clenched. "It doesn't change anything. Mom and Dad are still gone." "You're right," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "It doesn't bring them back. But what we can do is honor their memory. We can make sure no one else goes through what you've been through." For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of rain pounding against the windows. Then Jaden spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens to us now?" Marcus looked him in the eye, his own filled with determination. "You stay here. With me. As a family." The following week, Marcus took the boys to the courthouse for the final hearing in the adoption process. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the judge reviewed the case. Marcus stood with Jaden and Jordan beside him, their small hands gripping his tightly. "Mr. Whitman," the judge said, her tone formal, "you've demonstrated exceptional commitment to providing a stable, loving environment for these boys. However, this court has a duty to consider the boys' best interests above all else." Marcus held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The judge's expression softened as she turned to Jaden and Jordan. "I'd like to hear from you both. Do you feel safe and cared for with Mr. Whitman?" Jordan was the first to speak, his voice clear despite his trembling hands. "Yes, Your Honor. He takes care of us. He plays soccer with me and makes pancakes like Mom used to. He's our family." Jaden hesitated, his eyes darting to Marcus. Then he took a deep breath and spoke. "I didn't trust him at first. I thought he'd leave, like everyone else. But he didn't. He stayed, even when it was hard. He's our home." The judge nodded, her expression warm. "Thank you both. Based on the evidence and your testimony, I'm granting full custody to Mr. Whitman." The courtroom erupted in applause, but all Marcus could hear was the sound of Jordan's laughter and Jaden's quiet sigh of relief as they threw their arms around him. That evening, the Whitman mansion was filled with celebration. Carla Mitchell, Marcus's close friend and supporter throughout the process, had organized a small party for the boys. Balloons and streamers adorned the dining room, and the table was laden with their favorite foods. Jordan raced around, showing off his new soccer jersey, while Jaden sat at the head of the table, a rare smile on his face as he sketched the scene. Marcus approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What are you working on?" Jaden held up the sketch. It was a portrait of the three of them, Marcus, Jaden, and Jordan, surrounded by a glowing light. "It's us," Jaden said simply. "How it feels now." Marcus's throat tightened. "It's beautiful," he said, "just like our family." The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of laughter coming from the garden. He stepped outside to find Jordan kicking the soccer ball around, while Jaden worked on a new mural on the garden wall. The scene filled Marcus with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. "You're up early," he called out, walking toward them. Jordan grinned. "We wanted to surprise you. Jaden's making the garden even cooler." Marcus turned to the mural, his breath catching at the sight. It was a vibrant depiction of their journey, moments of struggle, hope, and love woven together in bold strokes of color. At the center was their family, standing together, unbroken. "It's incredible," Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. Jaden shrugged, but his smile betrayed his pride. "I thought it'd be nice to have something to remind us of how far we've come." Marcus pulled both boys into a hug, his heart full. "I don't need a mural to remind me," he said. "Every day with you two is all the reminder I'll ever need." As the days turned into weeks, life settled into a new normal. Jaden and Jordan thrived. Jordan's soccer skills earned him a spot on the local team, and Jaden's art began gaining recognition at school and in the community. The scars of their past didn't disappear, but they began to fade, replaced by new memories and a growing sense of belonging. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Jaden looked up from his plate. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Marcus reached across the table, taking his hand. "I know she would be. She loved you both so much, and she'd be proud of the strong, kind, and talented young men you're becoming." Jordan nodded, his eyes shining. "And we'll always have her, right? In our hearts." "Always," Marcus said firmly. "She's a part of us, and she always will be." As they finished dinner, laughter and conversation filling the room, Marcus realized that for the first time in years, his house felt like a home. And in that moment, he knew that together, they could face anything the future held. A family forged in fire. As the weeks turned into months, the bond between Marcus, Jaden, and Jordan only deepened. The walls of the once silent mansion were now alive with warmth and love. Marcus had traded his high-pressure, workaholic lifestyle for something far more fulfilling, a chance to shake the lives of two remarkable boys and to find his own healing in the process. One crisp autumn afternoon, Marcus found Jaden sitting by the garden pond, sketchbook in hand. The boy's focus was intense as he worked on a drawing of the water's reflection. Marcus approached quietly, careful not to disturb him. "That's beautiful," Marcus said softly, sitting down beside him. Jaden looked up and smiled, a real, unguarded smile that still surprised Marcus every time he saw it. "Thanks. It's for the art show at school. They said I could enter as many pieces as I want." "I'm proud of you," Marcus said, his voice filled with sincerity. "Your mom would be too." Jaden nodded, his gaze drifting to the pond. "I think about her a lot, about how she tried so hard to protect us." "She did," Marcus said, "and now it's my turn to protect you, to make sure you and Jordan have everything you need to grow, to thrive." Jaden hesitated, then asked a question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Do you think she'd forgive me for not being able to save her?" Marcus's heart broke at the boy's words. He reached over, placing a firm but gentle hand on Jaden's shoulder. "Jaden, there is nothing to forgive. You were just a child. Your mom wouldn't want you to carry that guilt. She'd want you to be happy, to live your life to the fullest." Jaden swallowed hard, nodding as tears welled in his eyes. Marcus pulled him into a hug, and for the first time, Jaden didn't resist. He leaned into Marcus's embrace, letting the tears fall. Later that evening, Marcus gathered Jaden and Jordan in the living room. The fireplace crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the room. Marcus held a small wooden box in his hands, its surface worn but polished. "What's that?" Jordan asked, his curiosity piqued. "This," Marcus said, setting the box on the coffee table, "is something I've kept with me since I was a kid. It's my memory box." He opened the lid to reveal a few small items, a black and white photo of his mother, a toy car, and a faded drawing of a house. "When I was your age, I used to carry this box everywhere. It reminded me that no matter how hard things got, I still had pieces of my past to hold on to. Jaden and Jordan leaned in, their eyes wide. "That's cool," Jordan said, picking up the toy car. "Did you race this?" "All the time," Marcus said with a chuckle. "It was my prized possession." Jaden picked up the drawing, studying it carefully. "Did you make this?" "I did," Marcus said. "It was my dream house, a place where I'd feel safe, where I'd have a family." Jaden looked up, his expression thoughtful. "You have that now." Marcus's chest tightened with emotion. "I do," he said. "And so do you." The next day, the boys attended their school's fall festival, a lively event filled with games, music, and art displays. Marcus beamed with pride as Jaden's sketches received praise from teachers and students alike. Jordan, meanwhile, showed off his soccer skills in a friendly match, his laughter echoing across the field. Carla Mitchell, Marcus's longtime friend and confidant, joined him at the festival. "You've done an incredible job with them," she said, watching as Jaden and Jordan ran toward them, their faces lit with joy. "They've done an incredible job with me," Marcus replied. "They've given me a purpose I didn't know I needed." Carla smiled. "You're a family now, a real family." That evening, as the festival wound down, and the boys drifted off to sleep, Marcus stood in the doorway of their shared room. He watched them for a moment, their faces peaceful in the soft glow of the nightlight. Jaden clutched his sketchbook even in sleep, while Jordan hugged his stuffed animal tightly. Marcus felt a deep sense of contentment settle over him. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, fear, and pain. But through it all, they had built something unbreakable, a bond forged not by blood, but by love, resilience, and the shared determination to create a brighter future. As he closed the door, Marcus whispered, "Good night, boys. I'll always be here for you." Epilogue. A new chapter. Years later, the Whitman mansion had become a symbol of hope, its once sterile halls now brimming with life and laughter. The Laura Whittaker Foundation had grown into a beacon for children in need, its reach extending far beyond the city. Jaden, now a young man, had pursued his passion for art, his work displayed in galleries across the country. At the opening of his first solo exhibition, Marcus and Jordan stood proudly by his side. Jordan, meanwhile, had become a star athlete, his talent on the soccer field matched only by his compassion off it. He often returned to the foundation to coach younger kids, determined to give back to the community that had helped him thrive. As the family stood together, a photographer asked them to pose for a picture. Marcus placed an arm around each of his sons, his heart full. "Say family," the photographer said. "Family," they echoed, their voices united. And for Marcus, Jaden, and Jordan, it wasn't just a word, it was everything.